and dozens of law firms that he had a vendetta against because many of them either refused to represent him in the first term because he led an insurrection. He also committed persistent fraud. He had a huge fraud case going on against him and all of his family for 10 years of fraud. He had an auditor that fired the client, fired the Trump organization, claiming that nobody could rely on their financial statements because they had been given misinformation for years and years and years. He led the insurrection. He refused to peacefully transfer power. And then he wonders why law firms don't want to represent him. So he fired back at them, especially their pro bono departments doing free legal services for people who were against Donald Trump. And he put them on blacklist, and he tried to take away their livelihood. Many of these major law firms, and I worked in a couple of them, 50%, 60%, 80% of their revenue come from representing either government entities, because they don't all use the Department of Justice as lawyers. For specialty items, they hire law firms. So they're representing the government in some capacity, or they're representing clients, stakeholders who are in business with or have contracts with or relationships with the government. And Trump said, fire all of them. Some ran to court and got injunctions. Others paid a price. $40 billion, $100 billion, $40 million, $100 million, over $1 billion allegedly in free legal services. We've never gotten a proper accounting as to what legal services have been provided and by who. And now Donald Trump seems to be walking away from his attack on law firms while he goes after state bar associations that regulate the law licenses of lawyers that work for Donald Trump. What's going on? Why is it so confusing? We clear it all up on the Legal AF podcast, and here's a clip.
Well, let's pivot now from tariffs to these lawsuits against law firms that Trump has, went after these individual law firms and has now reversed. So Trump issued an executive order saying that the certain law firms were going to be forbidden from entering federal buildings, from getting security clearances, from doing business with the government. And that is just absolutely, that can put many law firms out of business, because especially businesses who work in Washington, that's their bread and butter, right? They have to go and talk to government officials, regulatory officials, and government buildings are everything. Federal government buildings could be federal jails and prisons, federal courthouses. It could be federal regulatory agencies. It could be so many different federal buildings that lawyers have to be able to go into, do business with. And there's certain types of cases or matters that lawyers are involved in that they have to get security clearances from the government. And Trump again said, we're not going to give security clearances to those particular law firms. And he singled them out by name. And he made there was no hiding from the fact that he was going after law firms who hired or who had lawyers on staff who he viewed were people who went after him. This is pure and simple retribution. There was no reason to go after these particular law firms. There was no sort of philosophical issue. There was no, they did something wrong and therefore they can't do business anymore. It was just, I don't like the lawyers you hired because they went after me, so I'm going to go after you. And like I said in the beginning of the show, many of the law firms capitulated and basically made a deal with Trump, and in exchange for dropping, in exchange for basically lifting these executive orders, he turned around and got free legal work from them. And it actually caused a big issue in these firms. Several people resigned as a result in protest, several lawyers, not as many as I anticipated or had hoped, but these people have families to feed and jobs. So they do what they have to do. And several of them just have huge morale issues internally. A lot of people were really upset by the fact that they would settle, but universities started to settle, and others, right? He's been going after people one by one, and people have been settling with them. But there's these 4 law firms who stood up to Trump, and I applaud them. It's Wilmer Hale, Perkins Coie, Jenner and Block, and Sussman Godfrey. And these are really big firms. And a lot of, and frankly, when they go to court, they typically win, right? Because these executive orders are illegal. Can't do this. And so they largely win. They've been fighting, winning. Trump was then appealing it, right? He was appealing these lawsuits. And in a reversal on Monday, they came out, the Justice Department came out and said, we're going to discontinue this litigation. I think they want to cut their losses because they keep losing. And word on the street is that and this was public, they came forward and publicly said, we're discontinuing these lawsuits. And word on the street is that Stephen Miller did not like the blowback, that everyone was saying, oh, he's chickening out. They didn't like it. I'm sure some of it came from the law firms who settled, who are pissed off, like, come on, we settled, you're making us look bad. And, so, and you're going to drop this now. So I think they got a lot of bad press because of, chickening out here again, and knowing that they're losing. And Stephen Miller told them to reverse it. And the 4 law firms got phone calls basically saying, oops, we didn't mean it. And we're not going to drop the cases. So it's kind of bananas what's going on over there. But, I want to give a shout out to those 4 law firms, and we should support them for fighting Donald Trump, because I'm sure it's not easy. I'm sure it's expensive. I'm sure it's hard to go up against the giant monster king who has all the power and then some, because he's taking much more power than is granted to him under the Constitution, with full immunity granted to him by the Supreme Court. So taking on Trump is no small feat. He's vindictive, he's a bully, he's mean, and he is, it's got to be a hard thing to do. So I wanted to give a shout out to these firms, which is why I really wanted to talk about this today. So what are your thoughts on this, Lisa?
I join you in that. Those firms did the right thing by standing up to Trump. Unfortunately, Trump's mini-me, the acting president, Stephen Miller, apparently, has intervened to try to keep this litigation alive. Trump has put far too much trust in Miller, who is just a font of terrible, stupid ideas and completely ridiculous claims about the powers under the Constitution that a president has. And Miller, has asserted himself, apparently, according to news accounts here. And I just think this is a case where these were outrageous, unlawful orders to begin with. You cannot have the president of the United States using his power to punish people basically for their First Amendment activity, just because he doesn't like them and doesn't like what they did. They were engaged as lawyers in litigation on behalf of their clients. And did nothing wrong, did nothing that would warrant the restriction of their security clearances. It was purely a pernicious, vengeful act by Trump that no president should have such power. And in fact, typically under our First Amendment, presidents don't have the power. They're not supposed to use their power to basically chill the speech that the government disagrees with, even the government in the form of one person, Donald Trump, or the government at large. And so the firms that didn't cave were doing the right thing in defense both of their rights as corporations to be engaged in business, to have access to security clearances if their lawyers fulfill the requirements of those clearances, unlike some of the people in the Trump administration, the past administration, and this Trump administration who got security clearances over the objections of the actual officials who are supposed to protect us from people like Jared Kushner, who have conflicts of interest or issues that would prevent them from having access to classified information. There was no allegation whatsoever that any of these firms or any of their lawyers had any such issues. And so that it was, wrong. And then there are other factors that are worth knowing. So first of all, as you pointed out, and as the announcements of Trump's agreements indicated, these law firms that settled with him agreed to use, millions and millions of dollars worth of law firm assets, resources to aid Trump in his personal policy agenda. His agenda, not necessarily the American people's agenda, not necessarily the work of the American people, because we already have government lawyers in every agency that are supposed to be doing the job of the American people. This was its own sort of boondoggle, in essence, of Trump being able to command the control of private firm lawyers to do his bidding. Some of them claim that those settlements with the pro bono agreement, didn't necessarily give him that, full control, but some control or some direction, and that they could, use their pro bono hours in different ways. It's all very sketchy. And one of the most sketchy components of it was that one of the very first law firms, in fact, I think the first law firm to cave was Paul Weiss, whose chairman, Brad Karp, just resigned from his role as chairman of this mega firm because he appeared so many times in ways that were very concerning in those Epstein files. And so you have to wonder, the sort of dominoes that were set up. If one domino falls, then that may put pressure on others. So I do wonder about, Paul Weiss's decision, the decision of that firm to cave to Trump, and the role that Brad Karp may have played, given the fact that he was, is someone who, whose name appeared. I'm not suggesting that he himself engaged in any trafficking whatsoever, but he has resigned from his role as chairman because of fallout from the revelations from those Epstein files.
Yeah, he wasn't just a lawyer at Paul Weiss. He was as you said, the chairman of Paul Weiss. Like, that was a big deal that he resigned. And it was a big deal that Paul Weiss caved and settled with Trump. And so just the kind of overlap and connection, the connective tissue between Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and other people in high level positions of power like Brad Karp is stunning. It's absolutely stunning to me.
I was traveling, so that's Karen Friedman Ignifilo and a close friend of mine, Lisa Graves, bringing you the Legal AF midweek edition of the podcast every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Wednesday, I do it with Karen. Saturday with Ben Meisalis, my co-founder. And then on audio podcast platforms such as Apple and Spotify. Help us. Commercial-free versions you can pick up of that entire podcast on Legal AF Substack for paid members. You're already here. You enjoy our content. Hit that subscribe button. Till my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.
It's the wall-to-wall sale at Furniture Row, and that means everything is on sale. Find amazing deals on sofas, dining groups, bedroom sets, and mattresses. Shop the comfort, the style, the selection, the savings during the wall-to-wall sale, only at Furniture Row.
I gifted my husband these pants, and now he wears them everywhere. Meet Mesh Irons, the most flattering everyday pants for men over 65. With Air Max fabric technology, it delivers 10 times ventilation from waist to toe, elastic waistband, and 4-way stretch for a flexible fit. Deep pockets with zippers to secure all essentials. No scratches, no wrinkles, no fading, built to last with all types of work. Perfect for every occasion, from casual to active. Free return within 45 days. Comes in 7 colors and 4 inseams. Get yours now.
So friends, some of Donald Trump's flunky DOJ lawyers just filed a new brief in court. And once again, it opens sounding a lot like an unhinged 2 a.m. Trump social media